Hey, peace and blessings, everyone. You're now locked in with the baddest chaplain on the globe, Chris B. Thank you so much for subscribing to us on YouTube, baddestchaplain.substack.com, Spotify, Apple, and everywhere you get podcasts. Our guest today is Dr. Frederick V. Engram Jr. Dr. Engram is known for his work in critically assessing the ways that racism and anti-Blackness impact African Americans in both systems of higher education and the criminal justice system. Dr. Engram's first book is titled Black Liberation Through Action and Resistance Move. It will be available November 2023. Dr. Engram, good brother, welcome to the podcast. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. I'm good. I'm blessed. No complaints.
Wonderful, wonderful. Absolutely, man. So I want to jump right into it because we talk about liberation, particularly in the Black space. A lot of people have their own, like, you can almost imagine the corners in Harlem in the early 20th century. Everybody's got a understanding or a definition of what it means for us to get free. But in your estimation, what does liberation look like for Black folk in this time and space?
Well, that's a really good question. I think for me, liberation, particularly for us now, it's different because I think at different points in our history, there were different things that we were combating, different things that we need to get free from, from enslavement to Jim Crow to civil rights movement, et cetera. But I think now one of the key things I think we need to liberate ourselves from is anti-Blackness, right? And when I think about that, like, I think a lot of people assume that we're talking about anti-Blackness, that we're just only talking about anti-Blackness from the lens of like white supremacy, which we are, right? But not just something that's being done to us by white people, but something that we also participate in as like oftentimes willing participants. And so, one of the things I often talk about is like, and I tweet this often, right? Y'all don't hate white supremacy enough for me, and it's because I think foundationally, most of us don't really understand what white supremacy is and what it looks like, and how we play integral part in the success of it and the continued upholding of it. And so when I think about liberation, part of it is like understanding, like, and I teach my students this, like, we have to figure out like what part in white supremacy we play, what part of anti-Blackness we play, what part of all these other isms that we take part in, and figure out what that is and disassociate, right? And I use like more relatable things, like you have a preference, like you like dark-skinned girls or you like light-skinned girls, and you like specifically date people based on their skin tones, or you like people with a certain texture of hair, or you like girls that look exotic, you like guys that look exotic, or you believe that poor people don't deserve anything, right? That poor people don't deserve happiness, and poor kids don't deserve to have toys and experience joy and those sorts of things. All of those are remnants of white supremacy and anti-Blackness that we all participate in or participated in. And for us to liberate ourselves, we have to first understand how connected we are to white supremacy and to divest from it.
Yeah, that's it. So it sounds like in many ways you're telling me that when it comes to anti-Blackness, too often the call is coming from inside the house.
The call is often inside the house, but it's because of systemic issues and systemic oppression that led us here, right? Like, white supremacy is always to blame, whiteness is always to blame, but then we began to adopt parts of those ideologies and call them preferences, right? We stapled it into religiosity, right? We stapled it into manhood and womanhood and traditional marriages and traditional relationships, right? We took all of those things that were harmful to us and made them part of our personalities, right? Made them part of who we are as people, and not even recognizing that it is white supremacy that is causing you to operate like this, to think like this. And in order for us to truly be able to battle white supremacy, we have to battle white supremacy within ourselves.
Right. I see an aspect where this shows up, and it feels appropriate because this is homecoming season, is whenever I see people, like I went to a PWI, and I see people talking crazy about HBCUs, and this whole like banter that can happen on social media between Black folks who went to HBCUs and Black folks who went to PWIs, and just really dogging each other out. And I just think about, how can we interrupt that kind of disrespect? Like, all right, we know it's wrong, but how do we interrupt it? How do we learn how to support each other? Because we need each other. Not the space is going away, hopefully, right? So like, how do we support each other?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we have to understand like why we do that, right? And I think I'm big on cause and effect. I think a lot of us focus on the effects of things, or like how things, or like the things that are happening like in real time. But we don't focus on the ways that we got there, like the causes that led us to those places. And if we go back far enough, HBCUs have always been places that were minimized, delegitimized, denigrated from the lens of whiteness, right? They have often been places that were considered to be less than, not equal to, or not even equivalent to. And I could even take this back to even when I was an undergrad, when we chartered your chapter, right? Like I remember some of those very real experiences of our own alumni chapter, and like just how they treated us like very different than like they treated Frankie and them. Like when we would come to the alumni meetings, we sat in the back and they made Frankie and them sit up front in suits on, with suits on. You know what I mean? Like there were very clear divisions that were placed. Even if you look at UNC Charlotte and you look at JCSU and you look at those different things, like there were very obvious differences that took shape. And so when you have people who were students of those experiences, of course, they're going to have some real feelings about the way that we were treated in those spaces. But I think at large, when we talk about the experiences, like even if someone says, oh, you went to a PWI, you wouldn't understand Howard Homecoming, JCSU Homecoming, Spellhouse. But the reality of it is like no one can ever minimize a degree from Davidson College. You know what I'm saying? No one could ever minimize a degree from Yale. No one could ever minimize a degree from Harvard that a lot of our Black folks have. But if you say you went to Johnson C. Smith, right? You went to Livingstone, you went to Barbara Scotia, you went to any of those schools, people be like, what? And why there? Right. And so anti-Blackness shows up in the defense, right? Like first it's me needing to feel like I need to defend myself and the decision that I made to choose a Black institution. And then there's the other side, which is I need to defend why I chose to go to a white school. What both of those people don't understand is that these arguments are both because of white people, right? Making us feel that regardless of the decision that we made, neither one of them or either one of them were ever going to be a good decision, right? You were still the N-word at an HBCU and you were still the N-word at a PWI from those people. So you sitting here battling over which of these spaces is the best when we should be celebrating that Black people survived K-12 in this country, right? Survived the school to prison pipeline and made it into college and matriculated toward a college degree. That should be the celebration.
Yeah.
But we
100%.
like to pick and choose, right? We like to be one up on somebody. We like to feel like we did better than somebody in some capacity. All of those are, right, as Dr. Joy DeGruy calls it, like post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Crabs in the barrel, as other folks have called it, right? We want to feel like we did better than somebody somehow and in some way. And that shows up in these battles. But most of the people who get in the weeds of these battles are people who, like I said, from the beginning of this conversation, don't understand anti-Blackness and a relationship to white supremacy. I think most of us who get that concept don't engage in these conversations, right?
Right.
You only will see me even engage when you see things like the sister at USC who created the dance line, and then it went mainstream, and everybody was like applauding as if like this was something that was started at USC as opposed to having you know, like centuries old history at HBCUs. And we can make space to celebrate that sister for doing something uniquely Black for Black folk at USC. But we also need to also say like, but she pulled her inspiration from historically Black colleges and universities. And I think most of us our biggest battle is the erasure part of it, right? Blackness deserves to be celebrated in every corner of this universe and in every level of success that we can enjoy. And we don't need to be measuring each other in that regard. But I think one of the things that we often see is the erasure of our institutions that takes place at a lot of these PWIs that even I've worked at, right? Where you start seeing people like, because there's a large number of Black folks at a school, that place is now an HBCU, right? And you see them wearing stuff like that, or the HBCU-ish shirts, not recognizing that, like, not only is that anti-Black, it's also erasure, right? Of the histories of our institution and why they're so important and so prevalent. And no one's denying your Blackness and saying that y'all don't have Black history and interconnectedness and struggle that exists there, because they absolutely do. But you got to also recognize that when you do that, it's a slap in the face of the people that literally resisted white supremacy in order to create black spaces for us to learn. You know, and I think if people just understood those very minute details, I feel like these conversations would not even happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. Because you know what you got me thinking about is the ways in which being at a predominantly white institution, if you go, let's say you go to like A&T's homecoming, or you go to Howard's homecoming or something like that, where you're unbeknownst to you, like operating in good faith, unbeknownst to you, you're participating in a sort of voyeurism. Like a same sense of like, oh, let me just see what it is like here. Like I'm not having the full HBCU experience. I can just sort of like pick like a buffet and say like, oh, look, I put on the HBCU event at Davidson because like T.O. was stepping today. Like, no, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Right. And I think even with that too, I think parts of it is some of the children who attended these PWIs, a few things. Either they're first gen and their folks are just glad that you went to school, or they're first gen 100%. And your folks couldn't afford to send you to school out of state, and so they like go to the school in state because you got the most money. So there's a couple of those reasons. And then there are the people who sent them there because they were truly anti-black. Like, you're not going to a black college. You are better than that. And yes, our grandmother and great-grandmother attended, but we are now above that.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to send you to that place. And then you hear people like, well, they're party schools. But if you look at some of these states, the party schools in those states are definitely not even the HBCUs. They're these big white, predominantly white institutions. And so I think,
100%.
You know what I mean? So I think even going back to like why we feel that way, I think if you begin to ask people questions like, okay, you feel that way, but why? Right.
Really interrogating it.
Yep, you arrived at this answer, this decision for why you feel this way, but why that is. And most of them don't even have legitimate, concrete arguments or answers for why they feel like they do. And that is part of the lack of common sense of white supremacy, right? Like, we just adopt things because we've seen them enough, we've heard them enough, and we just start living them without ever really sitting down and breaking down, like, to bare bones, like, what do these perspectives mean? What do these ideologies mean? Why do I feel that way? Why do I feel like this is necessary? And I don't think we ever had an opportunity to really interrogate the impact of white supremacy on ourselves, right? And for those of us who did, those of us who had more radical parents, you did. And even me as a radical, right? I didn't have radical parents, right? Like, I had radical moments with my parents, but like I think overall, like, by and large, like, my folks were like rule followers. They were most importantly like respectable, right? They didn't do anything that would cause them to be considered a disruption. They operated in the ways that the society told them that Black folks are supposed to act. If you want to achieve any level of success, if you don't want to end up incarcerated and stuff like that, they did those things. But like, and even in teaching us how to be Black, there were still lessons in anti-Blackness that were also passed down to us too, you know? So
that's fair.
I think a lot of those feelings and perspectives absolutely start in the home because we don't understand white supremacy, even as loud as it is.
Come on. That's a real thing. I wonder in what ways you've noticed anti-Blackness arrive in higher education, and how that resonates with anti-Blackness you've observed and studied in the criminal justice system. Like, what are the parallels you've seen?
Well, even when you look at like experience, like, one of the things I talk about, was really angry about last year, is remember the MSU and the Michigan game, and they had that fight at the end of it, right? So what people don't talk about is, like, very similar to North Carolina. Like, you're either a Duke person or you're a Chapel Hill person. Everybody knows that, right? And
yeah.
Chapel Hill. And very similar to like Michigan, like you either go green or you big blue, right? Those are kind of how it is. And so people who are from Michigan are raised in that from like childhood through adulthood and beyond. And then if you're lucky enough to attend one of those schools, it gets bigger. And if you're fortunate enough to play sports at those schools, it's fed into you that, you know, the other school is your enemy, right? They're your opponent and you got to kill them, right? Football, we know, I think it's delaying. Hold on. Okay. Let me let it catch up. Okay. So football, we know, is a violent sport, right? We know it's majorly violent. And we train young brothers to physically harm each other every single week. And then when you have these
Right.
massive rivalries, we really instill in them. When you go on that field, kill them, hit them with everything you got,
Right.
take them out. So when you got some of these guys who are from, from the hood and they're from all these other places where loyalty is a huge thing, you told me to hurt this dude. You
Mhm.
told me
Mhm.
to physically go out there and essentially lay my life on the line for this institution. And because of this gift that I got to attend here, probably as a first gen student, right? Like I'm loyal
Mhm.
to my alma mater, right? And as
Right.
a result, a blow up happened in a physical sport. It's brutality the whole game. And you think they
Mhm.
turn that off simply because they go into the locker room when
Right.
everything wanes on this game and what happens, who takes the trophy and all this other stuff? Like, you think they just put that down. And so watching that take place and then the fight, and then the coach of Michigan calling for the arrest of Michigan State students, young black
Wow.
men. Watching that
Right.
happen, I was furious because I was like, how can you, in one breath, say you got to protect the young
Mhm.
men of Michigan whose mothers and fathers sent them to you, right? But then not have a care for the black men at Michigan State? He would have been better off saying,
Right.
we need to call for a meeting. We need to call for mediation. We need to bring the NCAA in.
Right.
We need to bring whoever in so we can sit down and talk about how this rivalry is impacting the way our students engage. Take a more restorative approach.
Uh-huh.
We went straight into carcerality and was talking about putting these kids out of school and locking them up. And I was
Come
like,
on.
that is so anti-black because you cannot have it's very much like the old adage of like the white slave master, right? Like you don't like black
Mhm.
people or you don't like enslaved people, but you love the ones that you own. You know what I mean? And so to me,
Right. Right. Right.
those two worlds were at odds for me when that took place. And I was like, how is nobody seeing how problematic this perspective is that you will jail kids
Come
while
on.
in your mind protected? No one died. There were no guns. No one was
Right.
stabbed. They fought
Right.
in a physical game. And the stake, instead of taking on the responsibility of like, we probably fed them a little bit too much of this rivalry and owning
Right.
your part in that, the first thing you want to do when they react to what you taught them is jail them, incarcerate them,
Come on.
take away their freedom and possibility for a future. Like that is how it
Right.
shows up in both of those places, you know?
Come on. Come on. They just immediately went to like, let's ruin their lives. Like
Yep.
immediately. No other recourse.
No
I'm
restorative
hearing that.
practice at all. Immediate jail. And I was watching those videos like, I want to go see this man about what he said. Like I was
Yeah.
furious.
Yeah.
I could not believe that was his first approach. Like these criminals, these deviants, these
Mm.
like that was how he was
Yeah.
talking about them. And I was like, they are the
Yeah. Yeah.
same dudes as the ones that are on your team. They just wear a different color.
Right.
And you ready to
And
ruin their
it's wild
lives
to,
because of that.
yeah, and it's wild to hear that because basically, like, you hype them up. You have people like banging Michigan State, and then immediately it's like, no, you've gone too far. Like, no, like you can't put that out there without creating some sort of parameters. You gave no parameters, exactly.
Correct. And it's the
Yeah.
wild part, like how white people and violence, white people could be violent as hell, but they also
Right.
determine how violent other people can be because
Yes.
violence by other people is like this, oh my God, how dare they? But white people, January
Hmm.
6th, everybody, like every time white
Violent.
people get mad, like look at these big schools, like when they win a championship or lose a championship, they burning couches and flipping cars
Right.
over. I think I'm paused. They do all of these things,
Right.
and we just be like, "Oh,
Mm.
that's them being kids." But the
Right.
moment, why, if we did that at a HBCU, like they'd be calling the cops in, they'd be probably calling for
Mm.
martial law and all sorts of stuff. And it's
Right.
like, it's
Right.
wild. It's wild to see it
Yeah.
happening and knowing the cause of it and watching everybody just pretend like it's normal, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. And it seems as if the world only collectively comes together to fight anti-Blackness for seasons, and those seasons have to be sort of like decorated around the actual loss of Black life, right? Like we saw what happened years ago when Trayvon Martin was murdered, then again when Michael Brown was murdered, Sandra Bland, and of course George Floyd in 2020. All these sort of like culminating events where the world is like, we're going to rally around fighting anti-Blackness, but then there seems to be like a fatigue. It becomes a trend, and then things go back to normal. How do you suggest that everyday folks listening to this who earnestly want to combat anti-Blackness long term, what should they be doing?
That's a really good question. I think for starters, like you don't get a chance to get tired, right? Like, and I think you raise a really good point about like how they get exhausted and they experience fatigue after protesting for 2 whole weeks, right? Or posting a square for like 7 whole days or whatever it is for them. But like this being tired of helping Black folks or being tired of helping liberate Black folks is old, right? Like if we go back to Reconstruction, right? Like at the period of the end of enslavement, when all of these opportunities were given to newly freed Black people, there was a time when Johnson was like, okay, that's enough. We've done enough. And if they haven't made it with what we've given them so far, that's on them. Because if we continue to give to them, then poor white people are going to start asking questions. Poor white people are still going to start wondering, like, why aren't they getting something as well? And if you look at that same ideology that exists and permeates now with those same perspectives where it's like, okay, we marched and that's enough. And it's like, no, until we are liberated, you keep marching. You keep protesting, you keep boycotting until liberation is for real. And most white people, particularly white liberals, have an expiration on how long they're willing to be uncomfortable, how long they are willing to fight, how long they are willing to protest, how long they are willing to give up something to liberate other people. Because one thing white folks don't like is to be uncomfortable. Everybody else could be uncomfortable. The moment white folks are uncomfortable, we got that's enough. We've done enough. I think when we look at what took place in like 2020, even with these universities, I had a tweet the other day that went viral when I was talking about like in 2020, it was, universities were, what was this, like pro DEI in 2020. And then in 2021, it was like, we had the anti-racist statements and land acknowledgements. And 2022, they were like, just kidding. And it started rolling all of that back. And 2023, it's like, if you even mention Free Palestine, you're about to lose your job. Right. So our liberation works from the white, liberal perspective is always questionable. Right. Like there's always this belief that like they determine who gets to be liberated and they determine who gets to be free and they determine how long we fight for it and how much attention it gets in that 15 minutes. Right. And that's an issue for me.
Yeah. Understandably so. Understandably so. It really is a incredible demonstration of the fact that power concedes nothing, right? Like you can be free up into a particular point, but no further freedom than that.
Right? Absolutely. And I think it's heartbreaking because it's like we support these people. They beg us. They come to the hood. They come to the deepest parts of the hood to beg for our support every 4 years. And then the moment they get our support, it's like they forgot what they said to us. They forgot what they promised us. And then you're looking at them like, I didn't sign up for this. I don't agree with that. Like, I don't agree with that perspective. And then they tell us, if one more person tells me to be patient, if one more person tells me, it's a start or we're getting somewhere, I'm gonna lose it. Right. Because and I say this and I have these critiques for not saying that these other oppressed people don't deserve help and to be liberated. But what I'm saying is like I just saw a tweet before we got on here that said that jobs are building parking lots near where they are, and that's where some of the employees who cannot afford to live in those areas are camped out in their cars so they can make it to work in the morning. And then in the same breath, we're spending billions of dollars to fight wars, and then we got our administration going on TV talk about how we could afford to fight 2 wars at once. Well, what about the wars we got in this country with homelessness, and anti-Blackness, right, and all of these things that are issues here that don't seem to be big enough issues but we got time to go get in somebody else. I've always, before I even knew anything about any of these states, I never understood the way that America found its way to be in other people's business.
Right.
But then you look at what's happening here, and it's like, if you got the answers for every damn body else, where are the answers for us? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you could tell Israel how to liberate herself, and you could tell Palestine how to liberate themselves, but we can't even get a anti-lynching bill for 200 years. We can't even
Come
get a
on. Come on.
George Floyd Truth in Policing or whatever act passed. We
Yeah.
can't have those things, but we decide how other people should operate during wartime. It's crazy to me that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you question that, if you even question those
Right.
beliefs, you're like, you're not patriotic, right? You're all these other
Hmm.
things. It's like, y'all trying to gaslight us here, bro.
Right. 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 I totally get that. I totally get that. Yeah. It just feels like a sense of the unintended consequence, or maybe it is the intended consequences, to be like, you ain't that much of a priority. You
Yeah.
know?
I tell people also, I said, the cruelty is the goal, right? Because here's the thing.
Come on.
Here's the thing.
Come on.
If we didn't have people who are unhoused, if we didn't have people who are hungry, we don't have criminality,
Right.
right? And without
Come on.
criminality, we don't have anybody to incarcerate. And without people to incarcerate,
Right.
we don't have that plantation ideology to flow to give additional money to those private funders. But also, we
Right.
got people
Right.
who
Right.
are not hungry and not unhoused. They got energy to resist, right?
Yeah.
So we got these demographics of folks who are unhoused and unfed, and then we got these demographics of folks who are incarcerated. All of those people are voters.
Right.
All those people would be voters if they had everything they needed, the most basic needs to sustain themselves in society.
That's right.
And then you look at how they are not given what they need. If those people were whole and were treated like whole people and got the things that they need, this country would look hella different, right? Because
Oh my
they
gosh.
would not be able to have the same social control over people that we do with this subsection of us who are allowed to vote, who do have housing,
Right.
who are not starving, or although we may be a paycheck or two away from that, but we're currently not there, right?
Sure.
And so the
Right.
social
Right. Right.
control component makes us believe that we are better off. Go back to the beginning of this conversation with the HBCU and PWI thing, right?
Come on. Come on.
The social control component makes us believe that we are so much better off than our people who are struggling and suffering, or that we are so much better than them. When the reality of it is that we are a lot closer to them than we actually realize.
Yeah, that's the truth. That is the truth. Yeah, no, and it's fascinating because as you're saying this, is also making me think about part of the American mythology is that, it's common for people to feel like they're just one move away from being a millionaire, right? Like if I just get that Powerball ticket tomorrow to hit, it's
Mm-hmm.
over. Like I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, it's hard to maintain an actual class solidarity or even just a general sense of empathy with people because it's like, they ain't really my problem. I'm about to be way better than them folks over there.
Yeah, and it's so wild, like how we will support, the Kardashians $1 billion line, and I'm not knocking it. Do you? We'll support
Right.
Rihanna's Fenty skincare, underwear, whatever, and you'll give all your money to that. But if an unhoused person walked up to you and said, "Can I have $10?"
No
and you're
more.
like, "Get out my face! Why are they always begging?" And I'm like, y'all don't get it.
No.
Y'all don't get it.
That is the truth. That is the truth. So switching gears a bit, I want to talk about your process of writing. As you're putting this book together, what did you learn about yourself? Like what in the process of writing made you discover aspects of yourself and sort of, you're spending this time working, you're learning about yourself. What'd you learn?
Bro, I write a lot, but this was different. Like even writing
Yeah.
dissertation, it was different. Like dissertation takes you to like a
Right.
whole journey, you go through a whole nother thing writing a dissertation. Then you write journal articles and it's another way of thinking and processing, but it's still different. Writing this book, man, was therapeutic in ways because I had to call up certain experiences that I had in my youth that maybe I never talked about publicly, right? Like I had to talk about my understanding of colorism based on my own experience, right? I talk
Yeah.
about how I learned anti-Blackness from the same people that taught me to be proud to be Black. You know what I mean? And
Come
so
on.
those things taking place at the same time, while also listening to people speak for us all the time, Black folks, millennial Black folks, white people. And all of those things were what brought this book to life, right? I'm sitting here and I'm watching things happen in real time. You know, my experiences at the different universities that I've worked at, my experiences as a student, my experience as a professional, my experience as a Black person, as a Black man, right? Like a descendant of the enslaved, a multiracial person, right? Like all of these things are drumming up as I'm sitting down thinking about, like, how do I tell the story about liberation, and how do I tell people who want to be a part of it how to get involved? And I have to tell the truth, right? Like we lived through 2020 and the Black apologists, right? We lived through 2020 and the mediocre white people who did the bare minimum, and how they thought that they became experts as a result.
Right.
We watched them commercialize Juneteenth, and we knew they were going to do it the moment we got the holiday, right?
Instantly.
You know what I'm saying? And we see all these things happening, and I'm like, all of those things came up in the writing for me. But it was an experience because there were parts of it that were hard. Like I had to name things that I probably hadn't spoken about outside of like telling my mom about it or telling my siblings about it or close friends. And now the world don't know. There's gonna be some people who exist in my life or on the outskirts of my life who are gonna read this book and be like, "Oh shit, he talking about me," right? I don't name it. I don't name anybody, but if you listen, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
And so I think there are parts of it that, you know, there's like both joy and there's both anxiety, because it's like there's joy, like, yo, I did it, like I wrote a book, right? And I think of all the things you think about accomplishing in life, right? Like I wanted to, but I didn't see how the whole process took place and how it happened. It just kind of came out of nowhere or out of the blue, really. And some people will be like, well, that's not true, Fred, because you've been putting in the work. And I'm like, yes. But for me, like, it wasn't like, I didn't see like this is the path that you go to make this happen. And then there's anxiety because it's like, it's art, right? And it's something that you created. During the process with you, we'll get to judge it, right? And they will get to have feelings about it, have feelings about your story, have feelings about the things that you shared, and some will debate them and be like, that's a lie, like they did with the 1619 Project, and some will be like, you know, I resonate with this, you know, and that you have no control over how they will receive it one way or another. And so, yeah, like that's all of those things are taking place, you know, within me at the same time. Like I'm excited. I'm thrilled. I'm also, like most people, like cautiously optimistic about it.
Understandable. Yeah, I hear that. So what has been a moment in this season that has given you a sense of gratitude or made you feel in awe? Like that sense of, like, you know, you talked about it a little bit where you're just like, I'm really writing a book. Like what has been that thing during this journey that really just gave you an overwhelming sense of gratitude?
Honestly, man, like I remember when I was working at American University in DC. And I remember like being between like applying to law schools and taking the LSAT and literally having what I like to call the come to Jesus moment and deciding that scrap law school, I need to get a doctorate, right? Because what I want to do and what I need to do and what I feel like is most impactful, where I'm most needed, is in academia. And I didn't know how that looked. I didn't know how to go about it, but I knew that that's what I was supposed to be doing. And I literally that day, that day I like stopped the law school journey and applied to Northeastern, and the rest was history. And even during that whole journey, like I knew, and one of our frat brothers, my cohort member, Dr. Michael Williams, we both said like, we want to be tenure track faculty. Like that was our goal the whole time. And everyone was like, yeah, most
Got you.
people who get this degree, like they go on to become deans and provosts and this and this. It's like, yeah, but we want to be faculty, and that's what we're gonna do. And
Right.
still didn't really know like the process of like what that looked like and how that was going to be. But 4 years later, I've only been out 4 years, and I've now been faculty at 3 universities, right? Two
Whoa.
R1s, right? I sometimes be like, I
Yeah.
have been a professor at schools that I probably wouldn't even have been admitted to when I was applying in high
Come
school. And now
on.
I'm teaching,
Right.
like, begging me in some instances to come there and
Yeah.
the opportunities to do this and to do that. But more importantly, like, to still be able to like be me in all of it, right? I'll be
Mm-hmm.
theoretical in one tweet and cracking jokes in the next tweet, right?
Right.
And professor in one moment and Fred is crazy as hell in the next. And like holding on to that. You know what I mean? Holding on to like
Yeah.
who I am and the
Yeah.
parts of me that are most salient to me, the parts of me that are the most humble to all of this. And I think those are where the moments of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
gratitude, like being able to be in community with my people. I'm looking forward to the holidays
Right.
and family time, and all of those things are the parts that I think for me make me constantly remember like who this is for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Keeps it all in perspective.
Absolutely.
I hear that. So what would you say is your hope for the world in this moment? Like as you think about everything that's going on right now, what is your hope for the world?
Well, I think it's probably cliche to say I hope for peace, but I do. Um,
Right.
but I hope for peace of mind too, right? Like peace of thought,
Yeah.
peace of existence, right?
Mm.
That
Yeah.
our existence is no longer triggering for everybody else, and that we get to
Mm.
exist in a place where we can just be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Free from
Totally.
expectations of whiteness and white centered systems, and free from expectations of other people, to just live as free people, right? That is
Yeah.
my most fervent prayer. That is the most present thing for me. And I think part of being able to live as free people is releasing ourselves from the shackles of whiteness and white supremacy, and
Yeah.
doing it with intention and being aware of it and naming it when it shows up, and tapping your folks that you love on the shoulder when it shows up in them, and being honest
Hmm.
about it, right? Like our divestment from those systems so we could be better people altogether.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now I ask this question to every guest that comes on the show because I love the variety of answers to it. So I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I want you to imagine that you're hosting a dinner. You can invite 4 guests, dead or living, fictional, real people. Dr. Engram, who are you bringing to this dinner?
How many people? Four?
Just 4. Just 4. Yeah.
Oof. Okay. I would love to meet my great great grandfather Fletcher. I would love
Hmm.
to meet him. He had a plan for his kids. He sent all of his girls to school. So my great grandmother and her sisters, my great grandmother went to college.
Uh-huh.
And his sons went into the military because he thought men were supposed to work and serve and provide for the family.
Right, right.
And since I did not serve and I went to college, I would love to hear his thoughts on that.
Right, right.
Definitely Harriet, because I wonder if she could have shot some more people, or like
Oh
if
no.
she could,
That's not what I
if
expected.
if there were some things that Harriet could have been like, you know what, he probably should have got shot in his toe. I would love to hear that. So my great grandfather Fletcher, Harriet Tubman, my mother's mother, my grandmother Anna.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
she passed my freshman year of college.
Hmm.
And when I went away to school, and it was unexpected, she was a young woman. One of the things she
Okay.
told me was like not to return home until I finished school and I brought home a degree. And so, like, even in my dissertation acknowledgments or dedication or whatever, it was like, Grandma, I brought home 3, right? And so I would love to
Let's
be able to
go.
see her and break bread with her now at this place in this point in my life to just hear her tell me how proud of me she is, right, and be able to share that with her. So my great grandfather Fletcher, Harriet Tubman, my grandmother Anna, and the fourth person, that's a tough one. I want to say something like, I want to say Dr. Martin Luther King, but radical Martin, right? Like, because I would love to hear how he truly felt about what was going on or what is going on, and how people have twisted his legacy in a lot of ways, and hear what he would have, or what he does think about that. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my grandmother Anna, Harriet Tubman, and my great grandfather Fletcher will be my four.
That's it. It makes me think about the ways that video games, like if someone plays NBA 2K, you can play as like 89 Jordan or 93 or 98 Jordan. So it sounds like you want 67 King. You want King who's like criticizing Vietnam and all that. So,
okay. Right. We want the radical, not the respectable Negro. We want the radical Martin that was like, you know what, knock all of it over, right? Like that's the part we want.
Just like knocking all over. I hear you. Well, I'm so excited for this book. Once again, it's called Black Liberation Through Action and Resistance Move. It'll be available November 2023. Once it's available, this episode will have a link through bookshop.org, so you can purchase a copy of it. But Dr. Engram, where can folks keep up with you in the meantime, in between time? Where can they follow you or your work?
Absolutely. We used to say follow us on Twitter, and I guess you can find me.
It's gone.
You know what I mean? Like I still call it Twitter. They call it. I still call it Twitter, but
it's called, right.
It's like your mama named you Ali. I'm gonna call you Ali, right?
Exactly.
So Van Carlito 2003, I think, is my Twitter /X name. That's fine. Instagram, Dr.Engram19. My LinkedIn with my name is also a good place. Never add me on Facebook. That's for family and friends. And I think my university contact information is public, so I can always be contacted there. So hit me all the places.
100%. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you all so much for listening. As always, be sure to watch us on YouTube, listen to us, watch us on Spotify, but you can listen to us on Apple and everywhere else you get podcasts. And also make sure you subscribe to our Substack, baddestchaplain.substack.com. And until next time, be blessed, y'all, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.